Jessica Fialkovich, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dominic. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on the show. Excited to be here and spend the next hour or so together.
Yeah, well, you've been busy for a while. You've been squirreled away writing a pretty cool book.
Yeah. Finally out and very excited about it. I'm very excited to share some of the lessons I learned.
Yeah, well, and quite a few lessons you have. Actually, before we get to the title of the book, we should probably do this part so that everybody knows. Jessica, who the heck are you, and how is it you come to be speaking to all these construction business owners all around the world?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So I'm what I've coined a business exit expert. So
Hmm.
I do business brokerage. I help people buy and sell companies, small businesses to mid-sized businesses, all across the U.S. and North America. And
Love
my
it.
husband and I have offices in three different major cities in the U.S. We've been honored as the number one business brokerage in the country by the International Business Brokers Association.
Oh,
Yeah, sold over 500 businesses in the last 9 years.
so you kind of know this stuff
A little bit.
a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Hey, just because it's new language to a lot of people, although on this show we talk a lot about making your business buyable. We talk about that a lot because, it's one thing to say, I want to sell my business, but you have to make it viable. But let
Right.
me back up for a second. What do you call small to medium? Because people right now are driving in their truck or working on the floor thinking, how big am I? So what's small? What's medium?
Yeah, it's a little confusing because it's broken up by business brokers and investment bankers into two like different segments. But what
Mm,
I define small to medium is any company that's doing between 0 and about 40 million in revenue.
that's quite a range.
It is quite a range. But
Yeah.
yeah, then you have the investment bankers that come in and they say, well, I only work with mid-sized companies. And mid-sized to me means 50 million and above. So
Right. Yeah. So everybody's got
yeah,
their own scale for that.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we've got somebody on the show here listening today who's got a $350,000 construction business, or they've got a $2 million cabinetry business, are they going to get the goods?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Our average client grosses about 1.5 million in revenue
Oh,
annually.
perfect.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. So the higher size deals, we do those, but our bread and butter is helping those small business owners.
I love it. And you've done 500 transactions in 9 years?
Yeah, over 500. We've got a fantastic team on the ground. We have about 35 brokers that work in our offices in those three cities. But yeah, it's been a great few years for us. We're the kind of firm or the kind of shop where we like to do a lot of transactions a year, and we're not just focused on one or two big deals. But like
Mm,
we talked about, we're servicing smaller businesses, so we're helping more clients.
yeah. So let's get to the title of the book,
Yeah.
because now some people are listening going, who's Jessica and how can I find out more? But really, we do want to find out more. This is the underlying question for all of us. We start these businesses thinking, okay, I've got a business, I've got the next gig, I've got the next contract. Now, the 5-year plan, the 10-year is maybe my kids will take over, but the 20-year plan is fuzzy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll sell, maybe I won't. So take us through that. Actually, sorry, tell us the name of the book first so we know.
Yes, it's called Getting the Most for Selling Your Business, and it's available on Amazon, retailers, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got a copy there that we can hold up
I
for the
do.
video?
Yeah, I do have a copy
Oh,
there. So
nice.
for
Red and
anyone watching
yellow.
on YouTube, yeah,
Yeah.
red and
Getting
yellow
the
pop off
most.
the shelf. Yep.
Perfect. Um, so what do you find is the biggest reason people can't sell their business? Let's start there, and then I'll let you guide us through this discussion.
Yeah, I think really the biggest reason that I find that they can't sell their business is more of the emotional side of it. And I talk a lot about this in my book and talk about how we do treat our business like it's our baby at times, especially if we've started, found it, grow it, or we inherited it from a family member. It's become
Yeah.
part of us and part of our narrative, our role, our story in life. And when we have that emotional attachment, it's hard to make expectation decisions
Mm,
outside of what we truly or really want. And really, when we go to sell our business, I was just meeting with a potential client actually earlier today, and they said, how do I decide what I want for my business? And I said, well, the flip question is, you don't get to decide what you want. You have to find out what it's worth on the
mm,
marketplace. And so, I mean, it boils down to, because we have such emotional attachment to our businesses, we're not able sometimes to make logical decisions in what
Mm,
needs to be done in either preparation for a sale or actually when we're on the market and looking at offers, removing ourselves and reducing our expectations of what a sale means.
yeah. Do you often find people have unrealistic expectations of the value? You're already smiling. I didn't even have the question out of my mouth yet.
I know
Jessica, tell me about a time you found
yeah,
unrealistic.
but you know what's funny is like it's either totally over expectations or totally under. Like I'll either talk to
Oh,
somebody and they're like, my business is worthless, no one would want to buy it, like who would buy this thing? Or it's always like a round number, my business is worth $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's one or the other. Either it's worth nothing or they totally overvalue it. But I think that's really because there's not a lot of great education and information about there, like about how much a business is truly worth. So
Hmm.
we're really all just guessing until we come to that point in time.
Yeah. I've been working, I've been fortunate enough to sell a couple of my own businesses and see some of my clients sell. And I know that there's only three levels, three numbers of business will sell for. There's
Yeah.
fair market value, there's
Hmm.
below fair market value, and there's
Yep.
above fair market value. And then fair market value is made up of all sorts of things. You've got the real
Right.
estate, you've got profitability, you've got inventory, you've got all of them, just a whole black box of things, right?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you enter into that conversation with people about valuation?
So I start by just explaining like how the market works in general. Doesn't matter what industry you're in or what size company you're in, but typically I talk to them about market valuations. So removing theories and formulas and things like that is basically businesses are valued based on what other businesses like yours sold for. There's
Hmm.
actually private sales history databases that are tracked all around the world. So business brokers and investment bankers like myself can go in and we can see what a roofing contractor that does $2 million in sales would sell for. So I start with that is like, because that's another hidden secret is people don't know that those comps and those databases exist, right?
Right.
And then we can start equating it to things we're more familiar with, like real estate, right? When you have a real estate appraisal done on your house, they pull comps in your neighborhood and that's how they establish the value. And that's the exact same way we do it for businesses. It's called the market approach. And it's pretty much the valuation approach that all business brokers, investment bankers, business bankers and lenders, everybody relies on that valuation method most heavily. So
Yeah.
that's what I tell people to just like at least get them comfortable. Like you don't have to understand all these theories and formulas. Like this is the basis of where everything starts. And it's based on real fact and real transactional history, not just a theory in a textbook.
Yeah. It's interesting because we all think, and this goes back to the emotion that you talked about earlier, that our business is the only one doing roofing, siding, landscaping, cabinetry, countertops, electrical, right? But we're not the only one doing it. It's been done for, I mean, not in the case of electrical, but a long time, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
How could I set up my business? I think I know where this question's going, but there's some businesses that sell for a higher multiple. And those businesses have a certain kind of structure, like they're just arranged differently. What are the things that help a business sell for even more than a one and done type trade? Like if all we do is install fences and then we move on to the next fence, that's a certain business model.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's three major buckets in how you design a business that's going to sell for that over market value, like you talked
Mhm.
about. And the first one you kind of brought up is having a recurring business versus a transactional business.
Love it.
So yeah. So if you have to go out and you have to, hunt to kill every single deal that your business receives and every dollar that comes in, like that's fine. That's totally fine. A lot of businesses are set up that way. But if you can get it to the point where it's recurring in nature, and a lot of us now think about recurring as like our monthly gym membership or all these app memberships, but you can do it in construction and trades too. Actually, I know HVAC's done a really good job of it. Of now, a lot of HVAC companies have recurring monthly
Mhm.
services or quarterly services. And that's going to increase the value and the desirability from a buyer. So that's the
Yeah.
one major bucket. And we could dive a little bit deeper into it. The second bucket is financials. So financial cleanliness and keeping great books and records is super key, not just into receiving a higher multiple, but for the business to sell it all. And it's also going to
Oh,
affect things like financing for buyers and stuff like that. So yeah,
yeah.
having
Because
a
nobody wants
really
to finance a shoebox full of old receipts.
yes. Yeah. And it's the shoebox of old receipts, but it's like simple things like having your P&L structured so that you have the same categories year by year. So it's super easy to run comparisons. Making sure that you don't have too many owner expenses or personal, or we'll call them non-business, non-required business expenses in your P&L,
That was such a
right?
polite way to say pizza.
Yeah, pizza.
Pizza
Yeah,
on the
we've seen it all.
weekends. Yeah.
Pizza, cars, divorces. We've seen everything run through businesses. So again, more war stories we could talk about.
Yeah.
So that's the second bucket, and then the last is really, and we talked about this beforehand, but you and I come from very similar backgrounds in how we run our businesses. But running your business like you're the owner and not you're an operator in the business. So
Mm,
really, truly sitting in that CEO seat.
right.
Jim Collins talks about it as owner versus operator. I think it's an E-myth too. How we reference it in the business brokerage world is called owner absentee businesses.
Right.
And that basically means that the owner doesn't have to show up in the business every single day to keep it running. And if that's the case, that multiple can be like half to almost 2 times more than what it would be normally.
Right. And
So
so that's worth describing what's a multiple, right? So it's
yeah.
half to 2 times more. What does that actually translate to into in real world terms?
Yeah. So most companies will sell for a multiple of what's called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's usually on your P&L. Your accountant can help you figure that out.
Yeah.
But the average small business, let's say, will sell for 3 times EBITDA. So if you have $100,000 EBITDA, you sell for 3 times, you get $300,000 for your business. Now, let's say that same company will stick with roofing, right? Say that roofing company is owner absentee with an EBITDA of $100,000. Now that company is going to sell for 3.5 to 5 times instead of that normal 3. So say, it's a 4.5 times EBITDA. Now you're selling for 450,000 instead of 300,000.
Right. And add zeros at will, listeners.
Yes.
Yeah. We were
Yep.
just choosing a company with $100,000 EBITDA. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's interesting that you talk about that owner absentee situation, because that's what we talk about in this show all day long. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. What are the kind of systems that you see in place for people when how did they get to a place where they are an absentee owner?
Yeah, well, it's the journey, right? I don't sit and talk to our clients and expect something to happen overnight. In your work with your clients, it takes some time, right? There's definitely has to be some processes and systems documented, some hiring, onboarding, and training, especially, right? So you've got your hiring processes, but then you also have like your production processes, your service delivery processes, things like that. Those are really important to have in place. That way, when you hire people in, if they do leave or, you have to ask them to leave, you can replace them fairly quickly. So I find that's really important. But that's just the beginning, right? Then it's all about figuring out over time, what can you take off your plate as an owner and replace with either a full-time employee, a part-time employee, or even a contractor, freelancer, anything like that. And I always tell our clients, like, start small. For our smaller clients, one of the things I see they're doing a lot of is their own bookkeeping, right?
Right.
And going back to clean books and records, usually that's not their best suited for doing that in time and skill set. So like, let's just start with offloading your bookkeeping. There's plenty of CPAs will do it for a minimal monthly retainer. Let's just move that off. So starting with the things that are inexpensive to replace and the stuff you're not good at or you don't like.
Yeah. Or that you might be doing wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I can do my own books, but it's going to be a disaster. There's people who are experts at it. That's an easy one. Right.
Yeah.
So the 3 things you said, the 3 buckets to get my valuation is, do I have a recurring business or a transactional business? Number 2, financial cleanliness, like keeping good records, tracking things. Or as those of you listening to the show all the time will know, I said, when we start to count things, we become a company that counts things. And so that becomes the expectation, right? And it's easier to count things. And then the 3rd thing is run it like an owner. I like that one a lot. Run this business like a business that just happens to do contracting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got any success stories you can share with us? I have another angle of questions I have for you, but before we move off this, the seller side, give us some success stories, some things you've seen that have really turned out nicely.
Yeah, so we've got a few great success stories. One of my favorite is it was a medical device company that we sold, and they came to us, husband and wife team, probably about 1.5 million in revenue. So, total typical small business. And why I like this story is because they came to us and they were doing everything. Husband and wife team, they could spread the work around, and they had some employees, but they were trying to tackle everything. They also, we didn't talk about this, but they service like a handful of really big customers instead of a multitude of smaller customers, which can be a really big risk factor. We call it customer concentration in some circles. So their valuation was really held down by that. It was about, I think it was 650,000 was their original valuation, and only about right around that average of 3 times EBITDA. So we're not getting over market for them at all at this point. And they really buckled down after some conversations, and they diversified their customer portfolio. They added in some type of recurring contracts with some of their bigger clients to protect that business. And then they started hiring like crazy. And this was actually, during like 2020. So we weren't in this hiring situation that we are sitting in 2022. There was some really good talent out there.
Yeah.
So they got some great talent, and they went from doing everything as a husband and wife team to completely owner absentee in 9 months. And when these two were buckled down. They were really like ready to go.
They were on it. Yeah.
And they were on it. And they exited the company about 18 months after our first engagement, and they had increased the business valuation 85%. Mostly in that multiple move, not with like adding a whole lot more profit, but mostly in the multiple move. So they sold for just over $1.4 million.
Good for them. That's crazy.
I know.
Yeah. How do you see that happening in construction type businesses? Because that's medical devices, which I understand, like the ability to add on recurring revenue in medical devices is good because there's lots there. By the way, for people listening right now who think, well, I can't add recurring revenue to my business model, I'm going to challenge you and say, you're not thinking about it right. Because as long as you put it in your mind that you want to find a way to have recurring revenues, you will. I've got an example now of somebody I'm working with that's a handyman service, and almost 100% of his business, not almost 100% of his business is service contract work.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's one of the, honestly, for when you look at all industries across the board, contracting and construction has the biggest opportunity to switch to that recurring revenue model. And like I mentioned, we've seen a lot of our clients in HVAC do this really well with service contracts. We have a really niche, a trade contractor that I won't mention what they're doing, because if people hear me and connect Colorado to me, that's so niche, they'll know what it is. But they get a lot of their business for a certain industry in referral income. And so what they were able to do is actually build a legal contract that would transfer to a new owner, guaranteeing that referral is coming in. And then they have a kickback relationship going either way. So now, like, it's not a service contract where they're going to go in every month and do something like a HVAC contractor would, but they know that there's a certain amount of business coming from this referral partner every single year.
Oh, nice.
So I thought that was very creative. We worked with another very specific trade contractor that works in a lot of big box stores, and the big box stores only needed his service at certain points in time. And this would be like every 5 years. So he actually, he branched out, and he's like, well, who would need my services quite often? We found the franchise area was a really good fit for him, because he was doing something that every single franchise store that opened in the network they have to do it the same way, So if the colors are a certain way, every single location has to do that. And a lot of franchises go in and they'll make all their franchisees do an update or a revamp
on the brand
of their
standards,
space,
right?
Up brand standards every 5 years. So that was his move, and he moved into that industry and just got a handful, like we're talking 3 or 4 franchise networks to work with in just a regional area. So not like going all across the country, but like 3 states. And that became larger than his business in the big box retail. So
great. Yeah. So all these opportunities exist if we just take the time to sit there and think about them and tease them apart, find the opportunities. You mentioned something really interesting here, which is just a change in the paperwork, which could increase the value of my business, which is This is so boring. I can't believe I'm even saying it. The transferability of a contract.
Yes.
Right.
I love that you brought it up. The nerd in me just like got really excited.
I apologize for saying it. And everybody listening is now laughing that that's what we think is funny. But it's such a simple clause to add. And, let me stop for a second. Believe it or not, I used to be a franchisor. My company prior to this, I was a franchisor. We changed the valuation of the company just by changing the franchise term. It went from 5 years to 7 years. And you're already smiling. What does that do to the valuation on the recurring revenue, right? And so I learned about this transferability of the contract because if we didn't have a transferability clause, we couldn't give it to somebody else. And it's such a throwaway sentence to add to a contract. It means nothing. Nobody's going to ever argue with it, except when they come to buy. Sorry, I'm going to let you weigh in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. So it could be called a transferability clause or an assignment clause. And it can be in a contract with a customer, a contract with a vendor. It could also be a real estate contract, like your lease or something like that. And Dominic, you're totally right. It's like 2 sentences, maybe in this, like a whole legal contract that usually most of them are like at least 10 pages or more, 2 sentences. But why it's important is because when most companies are sold, the buyer does not actually buy your legal entity, your stock. They create their own legal entity, and then we transfer the assets, tangible and intangible, to the new entity.
Right.
Super confusing, but we do it in a way to protect both the buyer and seller, so they're not associated with the same legal entity, and they can't do anything crazy that's going to put debts on each other or things like that. So, but when that's done, it basically breaks all those contracts unless you have an assignment or transferability clause, which will basically say that I, as the owner, have the ability to transfer this legal contract to any new owner at my will, or to any new entity at my will. And your lawyers will do a much better job of what I just said.
Yeah, we're just a podcast here. We're not giving legal advice, right?
We are not legal. We are not legal advice, legal attorneys, CPAs, right?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, we're nothing. Yeah. We're nothing.
Yeah.
But that's such a great valuation point, and it's literally zero cost. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be cheaper than that, but it's knowing those things. I don't know if you've ever seen right of first refusal in a sales agreement. Where I'm going to sell you my business, but just in case you go belly up, I get right of first refusal. So I could buy it back, fix it again, and sell it to the next guy.
Yes. So we do that a lot, especially when we have like things like seller financing and things like that. But yes, we do it a lot.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I promised to switch gears on you. Who the heck is buying businesses right now?
Oh, such a great question. So it's been a really interesting 2 years because there's been a lot of different buyer pools that have emerged. So traditionally, you have your traditional buyers. So you have what we call investment buyers, and those are people like private equity firms, search funds, things like that. And they're usually looking for larger deals. So companies that are companies that have an EBITDA of $1 million or higher. So larger companies. Then you have what we call strategic buyers. And those are the buyers that when I talk to everybody, that's who you think is going to buy your business. It's your competitor, or it's somebody in another state who does exactly what you do, or somebody in a different country that's contacted you and they want to come into your market. Yes. That's a strategic buyer. What really though is the biggest buyer pool is what we call financial buyers. And it's about 80% of the buyers in the business market. And these are people that have dreamed of owning a business for their entire lives, but unfortunately for them, got sucked into a corporate career early and never left. And so they'd been there for 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 years, and they've dreamed of owning this business. And now they're deciding to become an entrepreneur through buying. And that's been a really big buyer pool that's grown and become very diverse. I heard we have like this new term that we're throwing around, the Great Resignation, right? Around like people leaving their jobs and wanting to do their own thing. Well, the biggest beneficiaries of the Great Resignation are people selling their companies, because a lot of those people that have left their jobs are looking to start their own business or buy their own business. So now, traditionally we'd have a lot of baby boomer buyers, maybe some older Gen Xers. And now we have a ton of Gen X, millennials, even, we've got a few, I think they're probably coming up on Gen Z. We've got a few like early 20s, 20-year-olds buying companies now.
Wow. Yeah.
So that buyer pool has increased about 3 to 4 times in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So, because people often ask me, who would want to buy this? And it's because they're in a business where they're like, all they can see is the negative. And there's so much positive around them, but we lose perspective. right? We
Yeah,
lose perspective
really
when all
do.
we do is we get up, we drive to work, we go into the shop or go to the field and then come back. You stop thinking about it the way other people are seeing it, which is you've got the freedom to build a company. You can do whatever you want. You actually have more freedom as a business owner than anything else.
Yeah, you
Right?
really do.
You do. It's the
Well,
greatest thing
that's
in the world.
actually that mentality. That's another going back to like our first topic of why some companies don't sell. We have to remind our sellers sometime to have that mentality again going through this process, because you have this buyer coming in and they're so excited about your company and they're so excited about the prospect of being their own boss. And then sometimes you'll have sellers be like, oh, well, no, that won't work. Or I tried that, or nothing works in marketing anymore. I can't find anybody to hire. And you're like, okay, calm down. We don't want to quell
Don't
this
say that
person's
out loud.
excitement.
Yeah. Don't say
Yeah.
that out loud. Shit.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, these people they're totally inspired and excited. And it's been
Well, they
really
have
fun
a
the last 2
vision,
years.
right? The new
Yeah.
buyer has a vision, and perhaps like the seller has lost their vision, which is sad. But
Yeah.
it's true. Like we just lose our vision because we get caught up in saying the Smith family's unhappy, the Jones commercial job we're doing is unhappy, everybody's unhappy. You start to get wound up in it instead of taking a step back and looking at it as a business person who just happens to run a construction company, which is
Right.
obviously you and I talk the same language on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's who's buying businesses right now. We also have there's a small segment of people who flip small businesses. I always think someone's going to do a TV show on this, but they'll come in and they'll buy businesses that are underperforming, or, where the owner is the operator, and they'll do all this cleanup and then they'll flip that business in a short time frame, 1 or 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought about doing that myself, and it's just, too much driving.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. Although, we could turn around a business while it's still running with the owner in place. That's actually not that hard to do. Because as you said, with that medical device company, the owners are there. They actually know all the moving pieces. If you could just funnel their energy into one place, all of that energy can be used for growth instead of scattered.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, as you were writing your book, what's the part you're most proud of? What did you just die for me to ask, but I didn't?
There's so much. So it was funny because I wrote the book the same time we had our first child in October. And
congratulations.
so thank you. So part of me was like, well, my most proud part is that I got the intro done, like literally as I was driving to the hospital.
Oh God.
Like my husband finished. But honestly, my favorite part of the book, so the back last 5 chapters are all lists. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm super busy. I know how hard it is to sit down and read a business book.
Yep.
So the first 5 chapters are content. The last 5 are like, hey, if you read nothing else, here's the top 10 things you need to know about financing. But in there's a section, and it's about how do you increase the value of your business if you have 6 months, 12 months, or 24 months. And it's just a roadmap of, depending on where you are, time frame in the process, what can you do? What are some quick fixes that you can do to get either your EBITDA up or your multiple up?
I love it. I have a feeling you and I use the same reports.
Probably.
Probably very similar reports.
Yes.
Hey, this has been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed this. So getting the most for selling your business comes down to probably just putting, as you're saying here, simple systems in place, getting your emotion out of the way, getting out of your own way as an owner.
Yeah. We all struggle with that as entrepreneurs. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah. I'm in the process right now of introducing 2 people, a buyer and a seller, and the seller can't see life not being the owner of the company. And so he's in his own way, and it's an incredible, like the number would floor you. So I won't even talk about it. It has to do with the real estate in the city that he's in.
Okay.
But he just can't see what he would do next, even though he would have all the money to hire 95 people to tell him what to do next or to do it for him. Like it's an incredible amount, but he just can't see what that future would look like. And so he's holding himself back right now from what could be a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
But to his credit, it's not his time. Sorry.
There you go. The book also has a list in there of the best luxury travel experiences. And so we threw that in there of like,
now
what can you do
language.
After? Just plan a nice trip. Start there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You could buy a condo in Aspen, or you could buy a condo, in the Carolinas, wherever you want, or a house or a ranch in Texas.
There you go.
If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that? How do we find out more about you?
Yeah, the best way to find out about me is going to our website, which is ExitFactor.com. And if you want to learn more about the book, it's just ExitFactor.com/book.
And that's on Amazon as well, right?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's in Barnes and Noble's, Target, all those retailers too.
Yeah. Is it an audio as well?
We haven't done audio yet. That's next up on my list. It just got released in April. So I'm thinking that my publisher is going to call shortly and tell me to get in the studio. So
To do that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to buy a copy of this because I really want to see those lists at the end.
Awesome.
Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I think we might have you back in the future. I'm thinking.
I'd love to come back. We've had a great conversation. We were cut from the same cloth. I really appreciate having me on.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.